What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now, Jimothy. So ladies and gents, we have a bit of a live duel here between Raidraptor's Time Thief and Despia. Now Despia is a deck that I've been trying to basically sort out, and I've been doing a lot of testing over the last week, but I've come to a little bit of a conclusion which I'll get to in a moment. So I am actually on the right hand side of this, and I've started off my plays with a Fright for a Patchwork. Now this is definitely an engine that I want to keep in the deck as it is, because it gives you so much advantage. Fusion decks by nature just tend to burn through a lot of their resources, so being able to replenish your hand with resources, especially searching for a polymerization, is really a good thing. And then obviously if you pitch your edge imp with the fusion spell, you get to search for a fright for a patchwork, so it's a bit of a loop, to be honest. But Despia's is definitely an interesting deck. Now the reason why I feel like the deck isn't ready just yet is because it doesn't really set up a board. As you're going to see here, literally your best play at the moment is potentially Quertes and DPE. Now Masquerade the Blazing Dragon is definitely a very strong card, and as you're going to see here, it actually kind of puts me in a great position for this first game. Just being able to just burn your opponent just makes OTKing with this deck specifically very easy, mainly because you got monsters that allow you to just reduce your opponent's attack and just kind of like just basically attack over any of their monsters. Non-targeting, battle removal, but non-targeting effect in the form of Quertes, making everything that's not a level 8 or higher fusion monster as attack 0. So we're still carrying on with our plays. We started with a Luba. We've searched, I believe I searched the branded opening, mainly because I wanted to get it into the graveyard to be able to protect my Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, just to be able to just burn my opponent for as much life point as possible and then kill them on the follow-up. But I tried to mix this with Invoked, but I found that there wasn't really much, I wouldn't say follow-up, but there wasn't really much to the deck. There wasn't really much interaction. If you didn't get off your Alistair, you didn't really find yourself with any kind of interruptions on your opponent's side, well, on your side of the field. So your opponents were just free to just do whatever they wanted to do. Now, as you can see here, I haven't really set up much of a board. I've got a Despia Tragedy, as well as an Aluba, as well as a Masquerade Blazing Dragon. Now this is not the most optimal of starts from myself, so it's not the best. So my opponent starts off with a Cosmic Cyclone, decide to chain the branded in red to be able to bring back my Despia Tragedy, to then be able to try and fuse. But he does have the DD Crow, so DD Crow's the target. However, it does have an effect when banished to be able to search myself into a Despia monster. Now obviously he's just paid quite a lot of life points just to activate those two effects, because of Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, burning for 600 every time a card is activated by my opponent. And then on top of that, Cosmic Cyclone pays life points as it is. So my opponent's on a little bit of a clock. He's got no monsters on the field, and he's already took quite the amount of effect damage. He's also going to start off with a Upstart Goblin to try and draw himself into some cards. It looks like he picks up a Cyframe Driver, which is just the biggest brick you could ever draw. But he starts off his plays here, and as you can see, I'm already calculating the amount of life points he's going to be taking. He starts off with Time Thief Winder to be able to get himself into a Regulator. And then he's thinking what he can do next. I'm just kind of like concentrating on my Masquerade, thinking whether or not he needs to do anything. So he actually goes into Strangulanius here, special summons it, and then proceeds to overlay. Now if he does decide to go full combo, he will definitely die to burn damage, so it's probably not wise of him to do so. In theory, he should just beat over the Masquerade because it's in defense position and it's only got 2000 defense, so potentially that would be my first port of call. Now this is a good thing about Despia. Setting up Masquerade puts your opponent on a bit of a hyper focus, because they need to kind of get rid of the Masquerade to be able to play effectively, and with it burning just every little interaction, it kind of just forces your opponent to kind of deal with the problem as it is. But he decides not to attack over the Masquerade and goes to attack into the Aluba. Aluba doesn't really do much on my opponent's turn. It does more in the graveyard, to be honest, so it's kind of a plus being in there. But he leaves the Tragedy on field, as well as the Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. Now, Masquerade can bring himself back, but when he does so, he doesn't continue to burn your opponent because it's not fusion summon once it hits the graveyard, but he decides just to leave it on board. Now, I do go into my Frightfurt Patchwork to be able to search myself out another Egypt Chain and another Polymerization just to replenish my hand and have some more fusion target outlets. He decides to chain his Time Thief Raidraptor. Now, what was going from my head is he must have Gamma in hand, because if he's chaining Time Thief Raidraptor and he's leaving himself in an open board state, he's obviously trying to bait me into playing into his Gamma. So I don't do something too stupid. He's just telling me that he's actually spinning the Time Thief Raidraptor until the end phase. So I'll think about my plays here, and I'm considering just going straight into Polymerization, just attacking. He's already diminished his life points as it is, so literally one more fusion monster will just seal the game. So still thinking here. Decide to put my Tragedy in attack position. I put my Masquerade in attack position and proceed to, I believe I check my extra deck just to make sure that I've got the correct targets, because I believe some of the Despia monsters, they only require a light or a dark monster, and obviously I've got a dark on board. So I decide to activate Polymerization, fusing 2 of my monsters, and he decides to scoop it up. No coming back from there. He's got an open field. I wasn't planning to activate any more effects, mainly because I just didn't want to play into the Gamma, which he could have. It might have been a bluff, to be honest, but nevertheless, it was something I wasn't prepared to risk, especially as I was in a bit of a commanding game state. Now, going into game number 2, there isn't a game 3, however. Literally, game 3 kind of went the same way as game 1, where I just burnt him for life, so I didn't feel like it was any value in showing that. But this is what some of the problems that can be established with Despia in its current form, basically. So my opponent starts off with Regulator. I don't see any hand traps, and he proceeds to just go full combo here. In fact, I do have a hand trap. I have a Veiler, which I probably should have veiled on summon, which was a big mistake on my part, because it would have been stuck then. He probably had a couple of extenders, but there was no way he would have been able to get this far. And the reason why I hesitated is mainly because I had Veiler in hand, and I was considering holding onto it for a Polymerization target, but then I decided to shotgun it on his Raidraptor 4 Strix, and he actually chains. He actually opened the rank up magic, so Veiler's gonna miss its target now, and I've literally got no more interruptions. So he goes into Arc Rebellion. It's not something he probably wanted to do, but just to make sure that 4 Strix's effect resolves and he can still make somewhat of a board, he decides to go into the Arc Rebellion and then obviously continue his plays from there. Now, this is what I'm saying about Despia. The way that the deck, I have the deck at the moment, there's not really much room for hand traps, and it kind of means that you're limited in how much you can influence the board by your fusion monsters. Now, you can put hand traps in, but then you're taking away from the deck's ability to keep going, because like I said, when you fusion summoning, you're putting at least 3 resources into 1 card, and it's just not card efficient. Whereas game mechanics like Link monsters, or even like XYZ monsters, their card economy is just not as bad as it is with regards to fusion. So they tend to have a little bit of an easier time maintaining their resources, whereas fusion, you can literally blow all your cards into 1 card, and that card could just get the summon negated, it could just get blown up, it could get bounced, and you're just out of resources basically. So Despia tries to mitigate that by just trying to be able to loop some of their main deck monsters that are used for fusion material. So it is a little bit of a balancing act, and I do believe once the Fallen of Alba's structure deck gets released and we get a little bit more support, the deck will be a little bit more consistent. But nevertheless, continue with the plays here. I decide to chain Phantasme to his Strix, just to see if you can draw into any more cards, because I'm not looking in the best situation. I wasted the opportunity to Veiler the Regulator on reflection, which is something that I should have done, because there was no way he would have been building this board to the degree it's at now with the Regulator being negated. But Continuing off here, just reminding him that he can't use the material summoned via Y-Strix as XYZ material because it's one of Y-Strix's conditions. Sorry, not XYZ, link material. Can be used as XYZ, however, but nevertheless, he actually opened the soul, activating the soul shade force, paying half of his life points to be able to then go into his, I believe it's Cyber Dragon Infinity. Yep, Cyber Dragon Infinity. And then he manages to go into Rusty, and then overlays into a Redo, I believe it is, to a zone that Rusty Bardiche is pointed to, which means Rusty Bardiche is definitely going to get his pop. And this is still his first turn. I've got a body on board. He's going to pop the Phantasmate. In hindsight, I potentially could have kept it, but his Arc Rebellion is looking kind of big. And I probably should have kept it actually, because I probably would have been able to beat over the Cyber Dragon Infinity, which was the main issue with the deck, to be honest. Well, you'll see as we go along. But he's still continuing to pop off here, still being able to set himself a Fog Blade for my troubles, mainly because he went into the Rusty Bardiche. Decides to banish Boots to be able to add himself a Phantom Knights card. Proceeds to set 2 and then asks and then pass turn. So in draw phase, I draw. He goes to activate Time Thief Raidraptor, and I actually have the Super Polymerization. Now this is a nice cheeky little tech here, ladies and gents. So I activate the Super Poly. And they decide to fuse up a couple of his monsters. Now potentially I could have just let the Redo resolve and super polyed off the Rusty Bardiche and the Arc Rebellion. But again, in hindsight, the Veiler probably should have hit the regulator, and I wouldn't have been in such a dire situation. But it is what it is. You live and you learn. So I was just reading the effect of my opponent. He decides to flip the Fog Blades, obviously on the Starving Venom. Now there's a couple of ways that I probably should have went here. He does decide to Fog Blade it, and I make a little bit of a mistake. I'm checking my extra deck because I'm trying to push through all the negates, but realistically, in hindsight, I probably should have just played it safe and just kind of like set my second Super Poly, because I have a second Super Poly in hand. But I was so concerned with trying to just eradicate the board, especially with Arc Rebellion on field, potentially just doing like all the damage. I was trying to just kind of get rid of it, so I was just racking my brain as to what I could do. Now obviously Cyber Dragon Infinity is a bit of a problem as it is an Omni Negate, and obviously once he's seen that I've blew through a few resources, if I've only got 1 or 2 cards left, he's obviously going to negate it with Cyber Dragon Infinity, which is just going to leave him with nothing basically. So I'm just thinking about my options here, and this is what I was saying about the deck, ladies and gents. The fusions are your be all and end all, and at the moment there's not much negation in it unless you kind of like slide in a Macabre or you some way taking a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. It just still needs just that little bit more of a push. The cards are wonderful in terms of resources, but it's just the engine that you decide to put with it. So I activate the Magical Meltdown, trying to get my Alistair to hand, which does get negated by the Cyber Dragon Infinity. I tried to bait out a few plays. There's not really much I can do here, to be honest. I proceed to set 1 and then pass turn. So he draws into his card. Decides to swallow up the Starving Venom. Again, in hindsight, I probably could have summoned the Starving Venom in defense position, to be honest, just to be able to play around the Cyber Dragon Infinity. And I might have been able to kind of like survive a turn. So I decided to activate a second Super Poly, which is probably my main means of wiping the board. However, he does proceed to have the Raigeki. I do not have the branded opening in the deck, so I can't actually do anything, to be honest. Raigeki is going to wipe my Predaplant Drago Stepelia straight from the board. I proceed to try and activate his effect to put a counter on Cyber Dragon Infinity, but in hindsight, I'm not too sure if that would have resolved, mainly because he might need to remain on field to be able to do that, but nevertheless, it's not really going to make a difference on the outcome of this match in particular, because I'm out of resources, I got no cards in hand, I got no graveyard effects, and I'm staring down a Cyber Dragon Infinity as well as one back row, and he's also got one card in hand. The Raigeki was a nice little tech, and I think Raigeki is definitely a card that's not actually played or respected a whole lot, and I think it's quite a powerful card. Non-once per turn, just basically destruction of your opponent's field. If they've got no negation, or if they have got a negation, they're gonna have to do something in response to the Raigeki, or they could just lose their field. So it either baits a negate, or it actually kind of like puts you in a game state where you're actually at the advantage, as you would dwindle the amount of resources. And the reason why I'm still trying to test Despia, I do really like the deck, but when you think about some of the boards that other decks can make, even this board specifically, it's a rogue deck in itself, Time Thief Raidraptors, but just look at the sort of interruption it can put up in comparison to the type of interruption like that Despia can put up. It's just not the same. Despia just needs that little bit more of a helping hand. As you can see, he's popping off here. I've got no resources. I'm kind of just hoping on the heart of the cards, but I've just got no cards in hand. I'd love to see a Frightful Patchwork, to be honest, just to be able to just get some resources to hand. But he proceeds to summon a Forstrix. I already can see the writings on the wall here, but I'm trying to play it out, trying to see it through to the end, see if there's anything that I could do, because obviously in testing you just want to try and play your deck as much as possible, and in the most different situations as possible. So this is a situation that I'm not necessarily been in too many times, where I've just got no cards in hand with this deck in particular. So it's a bit of a learning curve, to be honest, ladies and gents. And I was looking to take this to locals at one stage, but it was really untested. His still combo went off here, just absolutely just making a mockery of my board. Goes into Utopic Future Draco as well as F0, and I'm staring down 2 negates as well as a whole ton of damage. I take the damage, draw for turn, and I actually drawed a branded opening, so not really much I can do with that without another card to discard. So I just proceed to scoop it up, ladies and gents, and just a little bit of a eye-opener. There's a lot that needs to be done to this deck in terms of build. You could potentially make this a going second build and just slot in a whole load of going second cards, and I think that's probably the best way to play at the moment, mainly because there's no real interaction. But nevertheless, ladies and gents, we're going to continue to test this deck, see if we can stretch it to its limit, see if we can just take it a little bit further than what it already is. But anyway, we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you do like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff. And I will definitely see you guys in the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.